already know Ken. I think probably most of you know Ken. But Ken is, he's very integral to the SKB workshop and has been from the very beginning. He's actually a great painter, both in studio work and in plein air work. And his landscapes are tremendous. And he has a new studio there on the mountain there in Pikes Peak. I kind of think of Ken as, remember the TV show The Waltons? Remember that? Well, Ken's like that up on Pikes Peak, and he and his wife. And we're hoping that Ken will show us around a little bit of his studio, but also to talk a little bit about how he works. And so I'm glad you showed up today. And without further interference, take it away, Ken.
Well, everybody, welcome to my studio. I'm glad to see you all here today. I hope I don't talk too fast and that I don't stutter too much because I'm a little nervous, not on camera very often. So what I'm going to do is later on in this session here, I'm going to show you a little demo that I started to get it. I got it blocked in, and I'm going to show you how I work, and I'll show you an end product too. But before I do that, I guess it might be a good idea to just introduce myself to you and tell you a little bit about my history. I won't make it a boring line-by-line bio in some ways, and add a little humor to it. I was born in St. Louis, in the city. My dad grew up 8 houses down the street from me, so we lived on the same block. Dad was my initial inspiration, motivation. He was kind of a wild kid in high school right before World War II. And the parish priest took him aside and said, "You're going to get in trouble, young man, so I'm going to fix you." And he gave Dad 2 options. Well, actually gave Dad 2 trainings. One, he took him under his wing and he taught him how to paint in oil paints. So Dad would go, get kicked out of class quite often, and go over to the priest's house, and they would sit and paint. And Dad was an authoritarian kind of pastor there. Dad learned to paint. The other thing that the Father Shermerkowski, it's hard to say, taught him, since Dad was getting into trouble, he put him in the boxing club. So Dad learned to box. He was 120 pounds, and he was doing pretty well until he met one boy that just pinned his ears back, and that's when Dad quit boxing and learned that, you know, don't get in trouble because Father will make you do that again. Well, anyway, moving along, Dad and Mom got married, and I came along. My sister was the firstborn, and I was the second. And I remember one of my first memories was watching my dad paint in the basement. He was working long hours, lots of jobs, I don't know, maybe 50 cents an hour or something for his wages. And at night, he would go down in the basement and he'd start painting. He'd paint signs for restaurants. He would paint, you know, all kinds of things. And then he started painting paintings. And because he was delivering bread, he was delivered for, what was it? Oh, well, anyway, one of the bread companies in St. Louis. And he delivered to restaurants too. And I got to talking to some of the restaurant owners, and Dad got to hang his paintings in some of the restaurants. So he was doing paintings, and the restaurants were selling work, and that was extra income for Dad. I remember my first impression was I asked my dad, when he got home from work, if I could watch him paint. He said he was going to go downstairs and paint. And he said, yes, if I didn't make too much noise and bother him because he had to get it done. So I remember following him down the steps to the basement, and he turned on the 100-watt light bulb, screwed into the ceiling, and got out some paints and put a canvas on his homemade easel. And I was standing there kind of shuffling around. He says, I want you to sit down and be quiet. So he got out a 1-gallon paint can, and I sat on it. So that's how young I was. I fit on a 1-gallon can. So I remember watching him paint, and that, you know, I was quiet because I didn't want to get shooed upstairs. And I remember thinking that if my dad can do this, I can do this. And I watched him create this painting, and it was just magic, and it inspired me. So, you know, move on all the way through, you know, growing up. By the way, I'm one of 8 kids. Just to show you that we do have a sense of humor in the Shanika family. My mother and father named all of us with starting our names with K. So there's 8 of us that our names start with K. And that was always fun to do a Christmas card where one great big K and the rest of our letters down the road. Well, anyway, went to grade school there and went to high school. Didn't have any art classes, just watched my dad paint whenever I could. After high school, had to make a decision what I wanted to do. I'm now, 18 or something. And I knew that St. Louis didn't have a whole lot to offer for me. Jobs were scarce, and we were living in North St. Louis in a rather low-income family. David, you were correct. I always visualized myself as John Boy Walton of the Waltons that lived in St. Louis. I've been 20 years. There's no better description of my family. I was the oldest boy, and I watched over all my siblings to make sure they didn't kill themselves, which kids tend to do, by the way. Anyway, after high school, at high school, they gave us an aptitude test. In the city high schools in St. Louis, they really didn't have a category for artists. So they threw at me saying, well, you did pretty well in math. And so the aptitude test said, why don't you go into engineering? Engineering, never thought of that. I paid attention to them and followed their advice. So I sold everything that I had my senior year. I had enough stuff that you could pack in a suitcase left over, and had enough money for 1 year of college. And I applied to a number of colleges, but I got accepted to the University of Missouri at Rolla School of Engineering. And by the way, if you're a resident of Missouri and you applied to the University of Missouri at Rolla, you get in. So it was really not that hard, other than my grades were pretty good. I was a B+ student. So I went down to the University of Missouri. I hitchhiked down there with my suitcase, and one of my friends introduced me to a fraternity. So I pledged the fraternity because it was cheaper than living any other place on campus. Because I don't remember what I had like $1,200 for the 2 semesters, and that had to include tuition, room and board, food, everything. And their room and board at the fraternity house was $1,199. So anyway, I pledged the fraternity. The first semester was kind of tough, getting used to living alone. With 7 brothers and sisters, Dad told me when I went to college that he wouldn't be able to help me. And that was the truth. He never was able to help me financially at all, just encouraged me to keep following my dreams. So I went to the university, and I was in the fraternity house. The first semester was kind of tough, a lot of things going on. And after the first semester, I realized I really didn't want to be an engineer. We drank a lot in the fraternity house, a lot. And anyway, I just decided that wasn't for me, and I started doing some soul searching and decided that what I really wanted to do is kind of follow my passion. I used my dad as a bit of a role model, saying I can do what he can do. I had been good at drawing and painting, and I picked up a couple of commissions in high school. And I said, I think I'll go to art school if I can. So I applied to a number of art schools back in November. And I got accepted to the Kansas City Art Institute, the Chicago Art Institute, the Rhode Island School of Design, and there was one other. But only the Kansas City Art Institute offered me an interview, and it was only 120 miles away. So I went up for the interview. Again, they asked me to bring a portfolio of work. Well, I had been in engineering school for the semester, and I didn't have anything. So I painted like crazy for about 6 weeks, threw everything into a cardboard box, and hitchhiked up to Kansas City. Not a good idea, but anyway, I made it. Made it to the interview, unloaded my box of paintings and drawings through the committee, and they all sent me out to walk around the campus for an hour where they reviewed my work. When I came back in, they said I had a favorable review and that they would get back in touch with me. Before I left, I told them that I didn't have any money and that I was independent from my parents. And they also asked a few questions about my family. And I said, I have 7 brothers and sisters, and my dad, doesn't make much money. And they said, okay. Well, anyway, about 6 weeks later, I got a notice from them that they accepted me into the school and that they gave me a financial package so I could attend. This is like a carrot in front of a donkey when you want them to move. The financial package started with a really nice scholarship and an equal grant, and then a small loan, and then a job on campus to help earn some money. Well, all that together equaled what they charged me. And so the first year, the grant and loan was bigger. First semester, second semester, the grant and scholarship got a little smaller, and the loan got a little bigger. Until finally, my senior year, very little grant, very little scholarship, and it was all loan. So I ended up, with that light at the end of the tunnel, ready to grab that carrot, and on a pile of school loans. Anyway, I did go through all 4 years, well, actually 3 years there, because I had 1 year at University of Missouri. And I graduated from the Kansas City Art Institute with a split degree in painting and printmaking. And those years at the Art Institute were the best of times and the worst of times. As I said, the financial package just covered the costs of going to school. It did not cover my room and board or food or anything. So I had to hold down jobs on the weekend. I pumped gas, delivered pizzas. I did anything and everything I could. The rent on the apartment the room I rented a room from a little old lady whose husband had died, and she was renting out rooms in her house to make her ends meet. And I had a room upstairs with a bed, a chair and table, and a hot plate. And we got all our water and did our dishes in the bathroom. And shared it with 3 other guys because there was 3 rooms upstairs. I never even met them. The rent was $50 a month. And I worked at a gas station at that time, and I made like $1 an hour. So it was really the best of times and the worst of times. I remember my junior year was kind of tough. I lived on oatmeal for a whole semester. In the morning, I'd make a pot of oatmeal, and I didn't have milk or sugar. So I just eat the oatmeal while it came off the stove, put the pot in the refrigerator, and then at lunch come home and slice a piece of it off and have that for lunch. I couldn't eat oatmeal for probably about 15 years after that. Well, anyway, after the Art Institute, I graduated, and everybody was coming back from Vietnam, and there weren't many jobs available. And of course, you looked in the newspaper and said, "Wanted artists, do anything you want, we'll pay you lots of money." Couldn't find that. So while I was also at the Art Institute, I did have a weekend job as a picture framer at a local picture framing shop, and I learned the trade. And after graduation, I got a job. This is going to come in a little bit later. I got a job at a cabinet making shop. It was a factory type thing, and it worked in mostly Formica and melamine. And I got a job there. Now, the environment was pretty terrible. And I'm sure everybody has had jobs like this or some similar story. This was a startup company by a couple of Vietnam veterans that had taken their GI Bill and started this company. They rented an old grocery store building. So we had this flat, square building with nothing on the inside, no air conditioning, a couple of fans to move the air around, some table saws, some routers, and some work tables, and a giant compressor in the corner. This is Kansas City in July. It's 110 degrees with 100% humidity, and we're in this building with all the noise and no air moving around. Those were another of the best and worst of times. But I did learn some skills there on some woodworking and on some building and construction things. Worked there for about 18 months, paid off some loans, paid down some loans anyway, and decided that really was not a good job because the vocabulary of everybody that worked there was street trash, and I was bringing it home with me. And woke up one day with my vocabulary being in the gutter and not even realizing that it happened to me, and decided that I needed to quit that job. Luckily, at the same time, the company that I had worked for making picture frames, I met them at Christmas time. We went just down, it was on the Country Club Plaza, and I ran into him, and he said, "We haven't been able to replace you ever since you quit." And I said, "Oh, he asked me if I wanted to work for him again, and really couldn't because it was only part-time and the money wasn't good enough to pay rent." Anyway, he called me up 2 weeks later and says, "Why don't I sell you all the equipment and you start your own business?" And I said, "I didn't have any money." He says, "No problem. You take the equipment off my hands and pay me when you can." So I went down there and picked up the mat cutter and a trailer load of molding and some mat board and some things. And I set it up in the basement of the little house that we were renting, and made up some samples and traveled around Kansas City to every place I could think, saying, you know, I'll do picture framing for you if you want to start selling framing in your business. Went to card shops, went to photography studios, and a number of places. Found a couple of people that wanted to do it. It didn't cost them anything to put up, you know, 25 molding samples and take orders, and I showed them how to do that. So I started my business in the basement. I think Bill wanted $1,200 for everything. And so I started that business in my basement, and within a year, I had a retail location, and it started to grow from there. So for almost 30 years, I had an art gallery frame shop. I developed it from nothing to one of the best in Kansas City. And let me see if I can do this here. I'm going to show you a picture. You'll get a kick out of it. All right. This is an award designation, sort of like you see here in Colorado where they say the best of. Well, back in Kansas City, it was called Distinctively Kansas City. And this was my business, the Colony Bistro Art Gallery and Frame Shop. That's me with hair and a mustache. You can all laugh. I was probably 30. And the artwork on the right-hand side.
We don't see anything, Ken.
I know. I got a hat on. You can't see that. All that
No,
stuff.
we can't see the picture you're talking about.
You cannot see this?
You gotta share the
You didn't
screen.
share screen, remember?
Okay, where is that? No, it's right down here. Okay, I can see it. So, all right, let's see if we can do it. Here it is. Can you see it now? Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
All right. So that's me in my business. I built it from scratch. That was my first retail place. What you see on the art is a couple of three-dimensional pieces of artwork that I created. Back then, some paper sculpture type things were getting popular, and I was doing anything I could to make a living. This is another one. This is the year following. So for several years, I happen to have a couple of these magazines left. I won that Distinctively Kansas City designation, and that was kind of fun. So for almost 30 years, I ran this business, hired a bunch of people, trained them. A lot of teenagers got their first job from me, and you know, ran that until my daughter finally was graduating from high school. And my wife and I said to her one day, I'm tired of running this business. I'm working 7 days a week, 6 days a week, 50 hours a week. And I said, I think I've done it as well as I can. Let's move to Colorado. She didn't hesitate a second, and she said, sure. So we put the business up for sale, and made a trip out to Colorado, did a 7-day car trip around Colorado looking for a place to buy some land and build a house. And we found Woodland Park, and we found a piece of property 14 miles out of town. And we bought the property, and the business hadn't sold yet. And it took about a year and a half to sell the business. And I ended up not being able to sell the entire thing, but to sell assets. And so I ended up keeping a bunch of the artwork that didn't sell. You know, the guy didn't have enough money for everything. And I kept some framing. We moved up here, rented a house, and then I designed and I built the house on the property. And there's the house. That was our house in Trout Creek. My studio is up above the garage. Now you notice there's no trees behind the house. So this picture was taken 2 years after we finished the house, and that was the Hayman fire. The Hayman fire, which was the largest fire in Colorado history, burned right up to my back door. That hill behind the house was covered with 7,500-foot trees. It stopped right there where you see the cutout into the hill where the house was built. The house did survive, but it was pretty traumatic for all of us. We were evacuated 21 days, and during that time, they wouldn't tell us whether the house survived or not. Well, it did survive, but we had a lot of smoke damage and damage to the interior, although it didn't burn. Think about having your electricity turned off for 21 days. Your freezer has ice cream and hamburger and turkeys in it, and it all melts out onto the floor. And the reverse of atmospheric pressure on a fire like that, it sucked in ashes into the exhaust from the furnace, and the furnace filter had burnt. So we had smoke all over. It took about 6 months to get the smoke off the walls and the ceilings and repainting and replacing all the flooring and everything, but we survived. I thought I'd give you a little tour. We moved up here after the Hayman fire. I built my studio. This is the studio building that I built. Me and one other fellow and my wife, and I grabbed some of my neighbors, and we built this building. This was my studio. It was 24 by 36 feet. That was the downside. On the lower level was my woodworking shop for everything that I wanted to build. Those are my north-facing windows. This is an interior view of the studio, tiled. We had an arch ceiling, skylights, and north view. This is another view. This is where I started teaching. Now this would be the year right after the first SKB. And Jim Parkman convinced me that I needed to start teaching. And so with his help and encouragement, and of course Wanda and everybody else there, I started teaching. This is another view of the interior. By the way, I did all this myself with just one fellow. He helped me do the framing. And then I put in the insulation, the electrical, the plumbing, the heating, did all the sheetrocking, texturized it, laid the tile, built the cabinets, put the fireplace in too, because I had a wood burning fireplace to augment the baseboard heating. So we did it all. That's where I painted. I had good north light. That's my easel. This is now the next house. After living out there for 17 years, my wife decided that the commuting of 14, 15 miles into town was wearing her out. And we had 5 acres of land, and I was getting tired of pushing snow down a 300-foot driveway and cutting the grass. And the trees on the back of the house were starting to replenish, and it wasn't so desolate looking like the side of the moon. So we put the house up for sale, and we found this place in Woodland Park on Fairfield Lane, and we bought that house. That would be about 5 years ago. It had this detached garage, and I converted this garage into my second studio. And this is the pictures of the second studio. It was 26 by 36 feet. North light there by you can see my easel up in the left-hand corner. And there's my student area there in the middle. And this is where I continue to teach. The idea was that moving into town, I would be able to attract more students and, generate a little more revenue. So again, I stripped this garage down to studs, insulated it, re-sheetrocked it, put the tile down, insulated the ceiling, added these cloud lights you see on the top with color-corrected fluorescent fixtures, and built a studio. And it worked real well. And then it really wasn't perfect for us. The house that went along with it was just really too big, 5 bedrooms, and just way too much. My wife said, "You're not really." Anyway, I got a little restless, and she said, "Okay, you get your bucket list. Let's build one more house before we're finished." So we bought a piece of property here, about a mile from this house. We found a little lot here, and I designed the third house, and we built it from scratch. I don't think I pulled a picture of the house from that. Well, anyway, this is the new studio. This is the studio I'm in right now. And if you could put me in that chair, that's where I'm sitting right now. This is the lower level of the house. Upstairs, there's 1 bedroom, an open family room, my wife's office space, the dining room, and our bedroom. So it's a 1-bedroom house, but down here I do have a 2nd bedroom exercise room. So here you're coming in the front door of the studio, which you enter from the downstairs, walk around the house. And this has north light. This is some of my paintings that you see on the wall, and this is a student area. Some of my smaller paintings, more of my paintings on the wall. A sitting area for people, because this is also a gallery area. My students take their classes here, and once a year, maybe twice a year next year, we'll have an open studio and invite the public in. This is my painting area with my easel, and this is good north light there. The lighting above is those fluorescent fixtures that I've been carrying around for nearly 25 years. I did convert them to LEDs with color corrected temperature lenses in them. This is my watercolor area, and again, another view of my student area. This is a secondary room that I have with a sink and some cabinets. This is what I call our framing room and my watercolor room. Oh, this is some pictures of some Thomas Hart Benton original lithographs that I had over from my gallery days. At one point, I had 75 of them, which was the largest collection of original Thomas Hart Benton lithographs in the country. I think I have 6 or 7 left. These are my watercolors in the watercolor room. That's my framing area where I cut mats and assemble frames. I also found this is really good for me when I want to stand and do watercolors, David. I cover that with an oilcloth, and I can spread out and stand above my watercolors or put them on an easel if I want. So I use this room for a lot of functions. The door goes into a storage room. I thought I'd show you some pictures of some of my larger paintings. These are upstairs. I built the upstairs too, built that fireplace, but that gives you a sense of scale. That's a painting I did for my wife of Pikes Peak. That's the great room or our family room up there with that painting above the mantel. This is our dining room with a 30 by 40 painting there. That's the biggest painting I ever did. That's a 36 by 48 or 40 by, no, that's a 40 by 60. That of course is there at Brooks Lake. There's some paintings, those are 30 by 40s in our bedroom. Anthony, I built that bed. And that's another one in the bedroom. That's a 30 by 40. A couple more 30 by 40s, give you some scale. And then I'm going to show you just a handful of some of my oil paintings and kind of the range of what I've painted. As I do this, you can see the titles. This is Brooks Lake. Why I paint, I tend to like to paint landscapes. And the overall theme behind my landscape painting is I paint the places I dream of. I paint places that are beautiful and solitary, places that you would hope to want to be, places that you feel like you're the first person that has ever seen these places. So they're places of solitude and places of peace. This painting, I want to stop for a second and call it The Long Journey. I did this painting a few years ago. This is one of the first narrative paintings I did. And the idea here was 4 Indian braves going out on their man quest. So they're like 13 years old, and they left the village for the first time. And this is their first night out on their journey. They found a kind of safe place to spend the night. You can see they have spears and a bow and arrow with them there. They're around the campfire. They've got a blanket on them. And they're a little scared, a little cold, and a little bit safe. But the vista out behind them shows their future. That is the possibilities and all the wonderment of what lies ahead of them in their lives. The 4 models were students from my class. I took beach towels, wrapped them in it, and said, we made a campfire out behind the house, out behind the studio, and I took a number of pictures, did some sketching, and composed this painting from that. So I haven't shown this painting much because I kind of like it. Anyway, some places around here. This is probably my favorite painting of all times. Pikes Peak with, I call it Shallow Waters. That's a 30 by 40. This is a nice small little piece I did up in Wyoming and finished it. We'll put some bears in it back in the studio. These are commissioned pieces. A lot of Pikes Peak, after all, that's why I moved here. This one is my wife's anniversary present. You can't have it. These are all sold, Garden of the Gods. Now these are gonna be, I'm gonna do a demo, and this is what the demo painting looks like when it's framed. These are 6 by 9 inch paintings on panels. I use 8-ply rag board, or I use a watercolor board, and I'll go over how I do these later on, but they do look real nice when they're finished. Nice little Christmas gifts, Father's Day gifts, start a collection type of thing. And I really enjoy them. What I like is that I can work out an idea and a color scheme, and if they really, really look good to me, I'll translate them into a larger painting. And I do some watercolors too. These are hummingbirds, obviously. That's a blue jay. It's not real clear. It's a opaque watercolor, Chinese watercolor on silk. This is one of my larger pieces. That's a 16 by 20. And some more watercolors. These are all 16 by 20s. That's a homage to my good friend, Mort Solberg. Inspired me. And this one of my students got a bouquet of flowers for Mother's Day, and she was going to go back to Washington, D.C. to see her family. So she gave us this bouquet. So I set up a still life, photographed it, and did this watercolor of it. That's a 16 by 20. That's some of my wife's and grandma's chinaware. And then, of course, a cut crystal piece. This is a piece I did in college. It's a watercolor. Still have a couple. Same thing here. This is a stone lithograph that I did in college, and drew it with a grease pencil on a real litho stone. And this was one of 3 pieces that I got that went on the senior tour to all the Union of Independent Art Colleges across the country. They selected 2 of my pieces, or 3, 2 of my pieces for that show. I never got them back, by the way. And then some pictures of me painting on location. That's, of course, in Wyoming. That's up on Rampart Range Road with the Pikes Peak in the background. Another painting of me in Pikes Peak. This one is in Wyoming. I wish Heiner was here. He was standing next to me for that last one. This is a painting I did in January. This particular year, I guess it was probably 6 years ago. Rocky Mountain PBS has an annual fundraiser where they ask artists all over the state to donate paintings for their big auction. They actually contacted me and invited me to be their featured artist that year. So with that, they asked me to do a painting. They sent out a TV crew and they videotaped me painting. And so I chose this particular spot, and it was late January, but it was a rather warm day, kind of. I had proper attire, but the TV crew, the video crew, they froze their asses off. Sorry about that. They froze, and this is just really a cute, it reminds me of that. So I donated the painting, and they sold it, and then the proceeds went to fund Rocky Mountain PBS TV stations. There's a picture my wife took of me painting plein air in Mueller State Park. Another one there in the winter. I like doing winter paintings. This one was fun. I put her to shore, and I was painting in the canoe. It was pretty calm, so luckily I stayed in one spot pretty well. And this is one of my prize positions. This is me receiving the Rose Award from the Susan K. Black Foundation with my buddies. A picture of me teaching a workshop. And then this year, just last week, I got the Best of Teller County Best Artist Art Gallery Award, which was a surprise. That showed up in the mail last Thursday.
Wonderful.
And then this is some of my students. Every year, except for the last 2 years when I was building this house, we would have a show at the local bank, and I would teach my students not only how to paint and present themselves as artists, I showed them how to put on a show. And so they had to frame their artwork, document it, make price tags, and they all had to help hang the show so that they would discover that it wasn't that easy to put on a show. So this is part of the motley crew that year. These are some of my students painting in class. This is, you remember Kayla Lillard? Well, this is what her first year. She was 12 years old. And some of my students doing some PR. David Yarger, Caleb Yarger, David and Philip, the twins. Up in Wyoming, our mentoring program. There, oh, Jared, look at that. And then this last year's show that I had for the first time here in the new studio. And so this was my class last Christmas. And that's the last of my presentation here on that stuff. So as I promised or threatened earlier, I think now I'm going to give you a walking tour of the studio, showing some more of my work, and then I'll go ahead and show you how I develop one of these small paintings. So there's going to be a little bit of a hiccup here because I'm going to go from the computer to my phone, So I'm gonna
Shut down your screen share
okay, I don't know how to do that. Okay,
up at the
stop.
very top. There you go.
Okay, and then I'm gonna mute, and I'm gonna go to join with video. Okay, can you see me on that now? Here, others, please join audio. Can you see me? Well, I guess I'm gonna.
Yes, Ken.
Give me a second. Give me a second.
I think.
There you go.
Okay, I've turned off the computer, and now I'm gonna turn this horizontally, just like David said. And I'm gonna go ahead and give you a quick little tour. Okay, we're gonna see if we can reverse this. How do we do that? Reverse. There you go. All right. All right, so I'm just got off of my desk, and this is a live view of my studio. And I'm going to try not to shake too much. I first want to show you some of my students' work. So these are some of the students' work. These are my new students this year. Two of them are 12 years old, and two of them are juniors in high school, but all of them have had no more than 4 classes. So what I do here is I do a demo, and I bring them along, you know, follow the leader, and then I go back to their paintings, do a little correcting for them. Maybe you got 2 square inches and says, now repeat what I just showed you. This is my 12-year-old here. This is Addie. And I think they're doing real well for their very first oil paintings. I want to teach them how to succeed by succeeding. As we go through a year's worth of classes, I touch my brush to their canvas less and less and less, and just go to a verbal kind of instruction. But at first, you got to show them how to do it. I have discovered that most artists are visual learners. So this is some of their first efforts, and I'm very, very pleased with it. Now, David, here's a couple of my watercolors.
Nice.
And this one. So we go through oils is our primary focus. Watercolors, I love it just about as much, and I'm getting better at it. In fact, I need you to be moving to Woodland Park so I can get better faster.
Okay.
Here's another one of my Chinese watercolors on silk. This is one that, of course, you'll recognize. I think I did this one in your class. Okay, now I'm going to step back. I'm going to go back in time 30 years, and this is a painting that I did. It's acrylic and gold leafing, kind of a homage to Matisse and a little bit of Egyptian influence. Anyway, it's more like the homage to Matisse's and his dancing figures. I did this one for fun. I've had it for 30 years, kind of in my storage room, but I thought it'd be fun to show you that you do develop and change over a lifetime. All right, so what we're going to show you next, these are some of the small oil paintings that I do on the illustration board or on archival rag board. These are 6x9 oils on those panels. And these, because they're on an illustration board, I matte put it under glass and frame them. So these are these tiny little delicate oils that I really like doing them. These will translate into large paintings quite often. A little different size. You can see a little reflection. This one I didn't take out of the bag. There's a nice spot up in Wyoming. It's a little larger one. This is a 12x16. The idea on these was to do a painting and make them affordable. So the 6x9s mat out to 11x14. So a person can buy these framed or unframed. If they buy them unframed, they can go any place they want and get a standard 11x14 inch frame, and it just really makes them very affordable. And you know, this is one that's in a frame, so you can see how nice they look when they're done. Okay, I'm going to show you these two. I did these two Monday and Tuesday, getting ready for today. So these are what they look like, you know, just painted on the mat board. And I'm going to go over how to do that in a second. Step back in time a little bit. When I owned my art gallery back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, these are my homage to Jackson Pollock's. I sold a ton of these. They were basically abstracts. They're acrylics and gold leafing and some dimensional paper framed. And I could do a piece to go with the decor
of a particular person's dining room or living room or whatever they wanted. And I sold quite a bit of these, and I think I only have like 4 of them left. And I really enjoyed doing them. They were kind of fun. You got into a rhythm. They were almost like imposing impromptu music. This is another one of the little oils. This week I've been working on a couple of oil paintings. This is the little portrait that's about half finished. This is an acrylic portrait I did of my father. This is from a photograph of him 6 weeks before he died. This is one of my treasures. This is a wildlife piece that I've been working on this week with the bear hiding in the, and it's not quite finished. I've got him in the frame at this time, just to see how they're developing, what I need to do. This is the piece that I was using as a demo for those pieces I'm showing the students how to do. And I got this one to the almost finished spot. And then this is one of my last 3 of that edition that I did in college. Okay, without shaking, we're going to go on over, and now I'm going to have to set this phone in the tripod here. So it'll take a second, and we got it right there. Get it lined up. All right, this is my workstation. So we're going to go over how I'm going to plug it in so we don't run out of juice. How I approach these. This is an 11 by 14 inch archival panel. I use 2 kinds. I either use the illustration board, and that's what this is, or I use 8-ply archival mat board, which would be your Crescent rag mats or your Bainbridge alpha mats, or you can go with Riesling, a number of others, but the key is that they are archival. You can paint on oils on mat board, in that if you think about it, an etching is an oil on paper, lithographs are oils on paper, so you treat them like kind of a hybrid. So I start off with 11 by 14 inch blank, and then I'll crop off the size that I want to do the painting, and that would be like this. So what I've got is enough room here for 2.5 inches of matting, and the matting will cover just 1/8 of an inch of my painting, so I don't have to worry too much about the edges. To prepare the panel, I have found a little secret. If you don't seal the surface, the oils get soak in too much. So what I found is that if I put a coat of liquid gel original, it's a painting medium, if I put a coat of that on and let it sit overnight, that seals in this surface right here, and the oil paints stick to it real well, but they don't get absorbed so terribly much. So this is 2 3/8 of an inch on each side, so a 2.5 inch matting will go around it, and it'll cover just 1/8 of an inch of this border. When I'm finished with the painting, I'll let it dry a couple of days. I'll mask off this area, and then I'll spray it with a varnish to seal it in and make sure that it lasts a long time. Peel off the tape, and then you'll have the finished painting. So to get ready for today, I did just a block in on a painting that I'm going to do. I decided to have a little bit of fun here and do just a 3-color painting. So I'm using yellow ochre, permanent alizarin crimson, and everybody cringe and groan, Prussian blue. It's like phthalo blue, you know, it's the death wish. Anyway, and white. So those are the only 3 colors that I'm going to use in this painting. So I should have gotten this ready for you instead of sitting looking at the computer this morning. All right. I use a little bit of liquid, and it's a 50-50 mixture of liquid original and mineral spirits as my painting medium. So how I approach a painting like this, I'm going to use a number 2 long flat brush, and I'm going to put a second coat. I put the first coat on Tuesday because it seals up the paper a little bit better, and then today when I apply colors, I won't be leaving brush strokes and breaking through to the paper, actually the mat board. So I'm going to mix up a little sky color, and I'm going to start. I usually start my paintings in the distance at the sky, and I work my way forward. So I'm going to mix up my blue, and I usually add more white to it, and I'm going to put a second coat of my colors in here, and then I'll start adjusting. It's too dark. All right, if this gets boring, we can stop at any time because this is just a boring part, but it's kind of fun. This is what I'll do in class, is I'll do the demo, explain what I'm doing as I go along, and then have my students kind of follow along. And I'm just diluting this with a little bit of white because I want the sky to have some sort of lightness to it. The color of the sky gets lighter as you get closer to the horizon because there's water particles, dust particles, smoke particles, and there's more atmosphere. Talking and swapping. Okay, I'm adding just a touch of yellow ochre to that for this area right down here, not enough. So I'm going to clean my brush a little bit, go with a more pure color, get the blue out of it. Just yellow ochre and a little bit of white and a tiny bit of yellow ochre. This is going to give me a little bit of a glow right here as the sunlight is disappearing behind the hills here. This is a composed painting of my one of my favorite places down in Cheeseman Canyon, which is not far from Deckers. It's a really nice place. It's kind of hard to get to. You have to hike in a couple of miles to get to the best locations, but I like it and I'm very familiar with it. So, so this is a composed painting from memory of that particular place. All right, so I'm going to blend these a little bit and get this to look more atmospheric. So now that I've got enough paint on there, I'm going to leave this very bottom corner untouched, or I'm going to clean my brush. I want that to be clean color. As I move up, I'm going to make this become atmospheric as it changes from a light blue to a darker blue. And I want it to be kind of clean. So again, no yellow ochre mixed into this area up here. And I'll do that just by cleaning my brush a little bit. I did put enough paint on there. Okay, just a little bit more. I'm not going to dink with this as much as I normally would to get it just exactly the way I would want it, but you'll get a good idea of how I approach this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same color, just Prussian blue, and darken it ever so slightly. And I'm going to suggest, it's going to be a little lighter, suggest this hill of this tree-covered hill back here. Turn my brush on its edge and use that nice sharp edge to get the illusion of some treetops hitting the sky. And I just block it in pretty quickly like this. So as well know, there's lots of ways to approach a landscape painting, how to apply paint. And I could do a number of different ways. This is just the way that my brain works. And I just think it's logical for me. When I paint the subject matter and work out and try to paint a sky behind it, I can be somewhat successful. But sometimes my brain just says, this is not the way to do it. Paint what's the farthest away first and work your way to the viewer. And it just makes sense to me. That way I get the advantage of overlapping and I can get my perspective more clear. All right, so this is going to be treetops. I'm going to go back into this in a few minutes. Clean my brush a little bit, and I'm going to darken it with a little more Prussian blue. And here I'm going to add just a little bit of alizarin crimson. This is permanent alizarin crimson. And to thank, whoops, step in front of the camera, our sponsors of Richardson Company, I use their brand, and I like it. Their permanent alizarin crimson has a nice feel to it. It's too dark. I'm going to add just a little bit of alizarin crimson to the Prussian blue and the white, and that's going to make it just a little bit darker than the tree hills that are shown behind this. These will be trees that'll go down to the water's edge. This is still a little dark, but I put my darks in first, and then I can lighten the darks. If you try to darken a light, it's just much more difficult. So this will get put in, and I'm working kind of fast because I don't want to bore you to death. And I'm going to bring these tree shapes down to the water's edge. And so this is the next layer of trees. All right, I got enough paint on there. I'm going to work some edges a little bit. And with the dry brush, it's going to pick up a little bit of the light of the color that's behind it, which is a little lighter value, same colors, just lighter values. And it's going to make the tops of the trees look a little more transparent, like you can see through them as you can on trees when you look up at the sky. I'm going to just get this all filled in. I'm watching to make sure that I have some interesting edges, and talk and walk at the same time, and get this kind of established.
Ken, are you okay with people asking you questions while you paint?
I can't hardly hear you. I guess I gotta.
Okay, never mind then. Keep on going.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. You're like a whisper. I guess I don't have the volume up on this, so I apologize. But I can't hear you, so if you need my attention, just scream at me. All right, take a little bit more alizarin crimson, and at the bottom of these bushes here, these trees, I'm going to darken it a little bit. And as trees get closer to the ground, you don't see through them. You start seeing the dirt behind them and the thicker part of the forest, as opposed to the tops of the trees where you can see some skylights or some atmosphere coming through. So I'm just building my way forward. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of a white here, and I'm going to go back into this a little bit. All right, I've got this glow of light coming through here, so I'm going to go ahead and accent the tops of these trees. See if I can get the color mixed right here. Little white and a little yellow ochre, tiny bit of blue. I don't want too much blue because I don't want it to be real green. I'm going to show the tops of these trees a little bit more. And I'm going to, whatever side of the tops of these trees faces a light source is going to get a little bit of an accent. And here's where I'll start developing this from a picket fence kind of look into the look of a bit of a forest or some trees on the side of a hill. And we'll just work that a little bit. So obviously today, I'm going to try to just get through a one coat on this painting to kind of show you my thought process. And I'll probably go back into this painting tomorrow or Saturday and finish it and turn it into a pretty decent little painting. All right, so that starts picking up some of the light that's coming in on that sunset, sunrise, whatever it's going to be. I'm going to continue that a little bit more with these trees. Again, a little bit of light coming in and catching the inside of the trees, the side of the tree that faces the light source. Gets a little darker as it goes down and the light doesn't come through. I'm really going fast here, but you can get the idea. And I want to keep some interesting tops. All right, I'm gonna clean my brush. Here's where I'm going to have a little fun here. I'm going to go back to a lighter bit of this blue. And I'm going to put a couple of trees back in here. On top of the dark. And I can continue to adjust these as I develop the painting to make them look a little bit like ghost trees or something, you know. Just watch my sizes here. So it's basically a light against the dark, a warm against the cool. a hard edge and some soft edges to make them have some characteristics. I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to make these trees up here lighter. And I'll probably come back in a little bit later and darken that, but I'll get a set of trees up in here. And I'm softening the edges here because I'm at the edge of the canvas and I just want to have the viewer be drawn in to the painting and not encouraged to leave. So a little less focus here, a nice place to rest your eyes, and enough interest that you can lead the viewer back in. Now I'm going to add a little bit of this alizarin crimson here. And again, only 3 colors. This is kind of fun. I'm going to put some bushes along the bank down here. This is looking down into the distance along the edge of the woods there. I'm clean my brush. And now I'm going to put in one of the darkest darks that I have. I'm going to take the blue and a little bit of the alizarin crimson to darken it just a little bit. I'm going to put the bank in. Clean my brush a little bit. And I'm going to darken the base of these bushes. Just let the brush dance a little bit. And a dark area here to kind of break it up a little bit. And I'll go back with this dark, and I'm going to put in a grouping of darker trees right in here. Let's see, about this high. We'll do 3 or 5. Kind of a stylized pine tree. Okay, I'm rushing, but you know, it's still going to give you the effect of what how I'd approach this painting. Bring this down into kind of a soft, lost edges. Do 4 or 5 trees here. And now we're going to go back to a lighter blue. Put some bushes right in here. Let's see, is that right? I need to go a little darker. One more. I have a small painting I did earlier that I'm kind of using as a reference because it's really kind of hard to not have worked out some of the issues before you do a demo. So although I'm referring to it, I'm not copying it exactly. All right, it'd be nice to have a lighter blue set of bushes in here. Darkening it as you get to the base here a little bit. A little bit of alizarin crimson added to that. Gives you a kind of a purple. I got a clock here. I want to make sure I don't go too long on this. Bore you all to death, but clean that up. Go with another tree right in here. So when I watched my father paint as a child, my father did a lot of composing. I mean, I would hear him talk to himself, and he would just simply say, I need a bush here, I need a tree here, this is where I'd be fishing, you know, and it would just come out. And I thought, wow, that's really kind of cool that it's like composing a song as he painted. He made it look so easy. And you know, that's, as everybody knows, making it look easy means that you're really good at it. I remember my dad once said to someone, he was painting doing a painting at one of the art fairs that he used to go to. And they said, you know, Leo, you make it look so easy. And he stopped for a second and he says, well, that's good. He says, you know, think of it this way. If you were having heart surgery and the doctor had to get out the manual and keep reading what he did next, maybe he's not competent, and he made it look easy, right? And the person would laugh and say, you're right, you know, someone that's really good at what they do makes it look easy. I always have that visual of the doctor stopping and getting out the book and looking at what he's supposed to do next. Instead, I'd rather have the doctor be talking about his golf game. Would put me more at ease. So I'm working my way forward, just adjusting lights and darks, and giving myself this painting a sense of space and dimension. And again, I am really going fast, and my tree shapes are fair. I go back in and do some detailing here as I see it. A little bit on these trees. So some bushes growing along the bank. Little dark edge where the bank hits the water, it gets a little bit muddy there. All right, I'm gonna go over to this side now because I'm working my way forward. And I think we need a tree right about here. And a few more. I'm going to put in some purple trees. So the idea here is obviously we don't have a whole lot of purple pine trees, but as they say, and we've all heard this over and over and over again, that value does the work and color gets the credit. So I'm really concerned about the values that I'm putting in, making sure that the lighter values and the cooler temperature falls into the background. And the darker and higher contrasts give you a sense of dimension and perspective and where things are going on in the painting. If I'm not talking real clearly, sometimes my mouth and my brain have to have a little bit of a break as I focus on something. So these are just stylized pine tree shapes. Christmas tree shapes, if you will. What they read. I think I'm going to do pretty well getting this thing done in the amount of time that I promised I would keep to. So if you were standing here and you're one of my students, I would be talking about spacing and, you know, making sure that we don't have shark's teeth here, picket fences, so that, you know, it's not all boring and repetitive and being repetitive. So I'm a little concerned about that, so trying to make sure that I'm following that little rule. I have a couple of taller trees right at the end here to keep the viewer's eyes inside the canvas. I don't have to be real careful when I get down to here because I'm going to do a lot of overlapping. So David Rankin, when I watch you paint, I just watch your brush just dance around the canvas, and I just find that phenomenal. I just love that. One of the things that I do when I watch other artists paint is I try to anticipate what their next move is. And if I can guess it and get it pretty close, then I feel like I'm thinking like they are. And you know, that is a major thing for me, to be able to say I can step into your mind and figure out get some idea of what you're going to do next. I also thought, as a fantasy, that it would have been wonderful to be a little mouse in Rembrandt's pocket and watch him create and do the same thing, and just kind of, what would he do next? Oh man, I was wrong. Or yeah, that's what I would have done. And it would just be phenomenal to be able to be that mouse in his pocket.
Well, I'm interested in how the development of this is taking shape. Because
Okay, again, what did you say? I'll see if I could get the volume up. I might have hit it.
can you hear me?
Barely. Oh man.
Oh,
Ken's
Ken-
left the building.
Ken has left the building.
I'll turn his mic on his other PC. Hold on, give me a second. Where's it at? Oh, I can't turn it on. I don't know where he's at. He's lost. Ken, I know you can hear us on your computer. One moment, please, while we're having technical difficulties.
Dun 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 dun.
Do y'all want to unmute and talk? That'd be great. Or you're going to have Dave singing. That'll be bad.
I was just trying to sing the tune to Jeopardy.
Find him.
Well, I thought as I was watching, I was actually very impressed that
Oh, here he comes. He's coming back.
Okay, I accidentally turned it off. I hope you can see me again.
we can.
That was fun, Ken.
Oh man, I told you I'm not good at this technology.
We had
All
a
right.
party while you were gone.
Okay, everybody had a potty break, huh?
Yeah.
Anyway, I can barely hear you, but I think you can hear me okay.
Can you hear me, Ken?
It's like a whisper, but yes.
I'm impressed by the depth that I see in what you're building already, but I'm impressed by the fact that you're using a rather small brush there.
Well, it's only a 6x9-inch painting.
Yeah, but you're using, on a 6x9-inch painting, I would use a 1-inch wash brush for half.
I know you would. Yeah. Okay. So I'm greening with envy.
No, it's a different medium. And
I do have a larger brush here,
no, it's the medium.
but this one's kind of warmed up. You know, one of the things that I like about painting is the process of painting. And I really don't mind putting 10,000 strokes on a canvas. It's kind of enjoyable. And if I skip that process and I just go to the finish, you know, it's a kiss and a squeeze and you're all done. And I don't know if that's really the best.
David, the thing is, in a watercolor, one stroke will go all the way across your paper.
Oh, I know. You guys make it look so easy.
Well, the fact is that I don't think that you give much attention to the texture you're painting on, because you've actually eradicated the texture with the smoothing it out, haven't you?
A little bit, yes. What I would do at the very end is I would go in and put a few juicy strokes on right in the area that I wanted the eye to be drawn to.
Right.
So I put a couple of really nice juicy strokes here, a couple on the tops of the tree tips here, and maybe something right in here, and then with the water at the very end.
But you are wanting the feel of the surface of what you're painting on. That feel of the surface does not have a lot of texture in it.
No, it doesn't.
It looks to be very smooth, and that's what I'm impressed about, because I paint on texture, and what you're doing is you're building quite a beautiful depth of light here, but you're doing it on smooth.
Yes, it's illustration board, or it's the rag mat board
Yeah.
with just a seal on it.
Yeah.
So it is smooth. The only texture that I have is that the liquid that sealed it up, and the first coat of paint I put on yesterday.
I'm especially liking the sky and what that luminous sky and the gradation you got in the sky, how valuable that is to the overall illusion of space.
Well, thank you.
It's quite beautiful.
Slow down. I got it too wet right here.
That's where Dave pulls out his blow dryer.
There you go. So I am rushing here a little bit. I probably should have gotten this reflection back in here done before I went over here. But anyway, I'll make it work. Again, when I get to the very finishing parts here, I'll put a glow in the water that reflects this glow up here.
Ken, is your river wet?
Say again?
Is your river wet?
No. This down here, I put in Tuesday. So the block-in was done a day or so ago, just to kind of, so I didn't have to draw everything, and I made sure I had my horizon in the right spot, and I had my values, the darks in, and let them dry so I could paint on top of it. So what I've done today is all wet on wet. So I'm wet all the way into here. From here on down, it's dry. But it's funny with just three colors. Oh, I'm going to add a little yellow ochre here and put a little bit of sense of some greens when I get to the foreground, just to shake things up a little bit. Okay, so I can wrap this up in about 20 more minutes if you're getting bored. And then if you want, I can answer questions and stop painting.
Why don't we see if somebody has any questions that they'd like to.
Okay,
Remember, you have to unmute yourself to ask a question or hold your space bar on your computer.
well, I think that was you, Anthony. I can barely hear you guys, and I'm so sorry. I don't know what the deal on this phone is. So you may have to yell at me.
Jared likes the color harmony that you've built with your limited palette.
Exactly. This is one of the things that I've been focusing on the last 6 months, is experimenting with a variety of three colors in a limited palette. And then I've also done a few paintings where I had two sets of three colors, a warm of a yellow, a warm of a blue, and a warm of a red, and then a cool of a blue, and a cool of a yellow, and a cool of a red, and then combining them in one painting and using them in different areas. It's been kind of fun. And it just depends on what reds and what yellows and what blues you choose too. I'm going to put some submerged rocks in here. And I'll just start off with that kind of a look. One out here, a few in here. I'm going to get some more darks in real quickly. This gives them just a few minutes to kind of set up. The little bit of liquid helps them dry pretty quickly. And I want to have, be able to move this around and put something on top of it too. All right. I'm adding just a little bit of the yellow ochre to this pre-mixes here. And a little bit of yellow ochre with the alizarin crimson gives you kind of a brown. And when I add it to the blue, I get a little more of a green aspect to it. And it's coming forward. And as we know, in a landscape or in light, you lose your yellows and your greens first. So as I get into the foreground, I'll start regaining them or recapturing some of those. I'm not liking that, but anyway, I'll fix it later.
Hey, Ken,
Yes.
Margaret Miller, she'd like you to talk a little bit about your gear and the box, your gear that you're carrying with you when you travel or when you go out. Just, I think what she wants is, you know, what do you have in your gear that you're working with basically? Is that correct, Margaret?
Well, that's a piece of cake. I could take the phone off of here. I could stop painting and I can go pull out my pochade boxes and set that up very quickly. Let's see, the best way to do that, just turn the camera, I guess, and then, you know, take me a minute to go pull that stuff out. I do design and build my own pochade boxes. And a lot of people have bought them. I don't do it as a living. They're basically labor of love and, you know, charge enough for them to pay for the materials and replenish the stocks. But yes, I have a pochade box that I built. It is designed for 9x12 painting. It is designed to do one thing and do one thing well. So it doesn't adapt to a number of different panels. But the 9x12 fits in a backpack, fits on the tripod, and I'm up and painting in like 60 seconds. And people with the open box M's and all the others, you know, they can take 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes. Some of them I've seen people, well, give up and go watch other people paint because they can't get their equipment set up. That's a joke. We've all been there, you know, with a rookie. Would you like me to do that?
Margaret says yes.
Okay, if it's all right with everybody, I can stop
You wanna
painting
sit
here
out
because you
there?
can see how it's developing.
Okay.
Let me show you one thing real quickly. When I get it finished, there's your presentation.
Hey, Ken, can you
Yes.
can you take the camera in close and let us see a bit closer?
Yes.
Show us what it looks like.
Okay, here we go again. Let's knock the
Without
camera
hanging
off,
out.
turn everything off. All right. You got it?
Nice.
Okay, I'm going to show you my little 6x8 that I did on a panel. This is on canvas, and this is my my first try at using those 3 colors.
Very
So
nice.
kind of following that, and that one's finished. This one, again, following the same kind of thought process, but not totally completed.
Cool.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get a pochade box out, and I'll show you how it works. So we'll walk across the studio here to my other room. So we're going to get some bouncing because that's what you do when you walk.
We don't care
I'm
about
getting
the mouse.
seasick, Ken.
Okay, let me set the phone down for just a second. I'll let you look at the wall. And I'll get that stuff out.
Margaret, are you a painter? We can't hear you. Press the space
If I would have
bar down.
anticipated this, I would have been ready. Okay.
Press the space bar down and hold it down if you're in order to talk.
Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, I just unmuted myself.
Yeah.
No, we were working with, I'm here with the pastel group, and we had met with Ken and the plein air painters, and we're trying to combine forces here, Colorado Springs and Woodland Park in the area. So with COVID, of course, everything's sort of been put on hold for different paint outs and whatnot. But it will be fun to see his gear and how he operates in different weathers.
So you're a pastel painter?
Pastel, and I do oils and plein air.
Okay.
You there, Ken?
All right, I've got the tripod here. And what I need is I need Les here to hold the camera like he did for Wanda.
He's on
All right,
his
I think
way.
you can see everything here.
He's on
All right,
his
this
way.
is my backpack. And everything that I need just about fits in this backpack. I've got towels, etc. I got a brush case. I hope you can still see it. A box of tissues. My pochade box. A trash bag or two. I can carry a water bottle in here. I can carry a first aid kit and my lunch with me also. This is my pochade box, and I designed and built it. I'm going to move this to the edge of the table and see if I'm still in. Yes, you can still see me. All right, I have this fold-down shelf here that holds my my medium and my brushes. Here's a painting that was just started. I can put tubes of paint, palette knife, business cards, pencils, elastic thing. And this is my painting tray. It's glass covered. The only thing I carry with me in addition to this is a small tackle box, which keeps my paints and my medium and some bug spray and bear spray and a few things like that. And it's a small tackle box and it works just fine. So walking down a trail or wherever I'm going, this is my backpack and just a small box. It's real easy. This sets up very quickly on a tripod. It's got a quick release head on it here. I just set the tripod up, which looks on the side of my backpack, and I'm up and painting in 60 seconds. I do design and build these. I have a few of them available. I haven't built one in a few years, but then again, I don't advertise them. They just go to, when I'm out painting and someone says, oh, that's neat, I have some available, and I'll sell them. Again, I make enough money on them just to replenish materials. This particular one, there's a story behind it. This is made out of babinga. No, this is made out of padauk, an African hardwood that is red all the way through. I built my bedroom furniture out of this some 30 years ago, and I had a couple of boards left over, and I'd always wanted to, what am I going to do with it? And I had just enough to build this box. Normally, I build them out of oak, maple, and walnut, and sometimes some birch added to it. The fronts of them have a little bit of decoration here. They're very sturdy. They're designed for 9x12s. If you buy the thicker, these are the Pintura panels. It holds 2 in the lid, folds up, and they stay safe and they don't smear when you're carrying them back and forth to your car. If you use the thinner panels like the Raymore, you can actually put 4 in here. I have found that carrying 2 is appropriate for my needs. If I go out in the morning and I'm going to paint, 2.5 hours when I'm painting and another 2.5, I'm ready to go back to the car for lunch. And at that point, I can replace these 2 panels with 2 fresh panels. So there's a little method to my madness. I carry my a little brush carrier along with it. I set my jar of liquid here, and I lay my brushes up here. I hang my mineral spirits from this hook. This has my trash bag on a little V-clip. And again, it's very simple. So did that answer your questions on pochade boxes?
Yes, thank you very much. You should let
At
us
some
know.
point, we'll get together and I'll show you, you know, if I would have known this was a question, I would have had it all set up. And anyway, sorry about the delay on that. So David, is there anything else that I can do here? Because I don't really need to finish that painting. I think he's all got a pretty good idea of how it's going to come and be finished. This is my watercolor room. There's a couple of frames I'm ready to do some large watercolors. Anyway, they're all ready.
I've got a question about your matting on an oil.
Yes.
Because I also paint in watercolor. When I have an oil painting, I like doing what you do with a matte and oil. And I know
Okay.
that because of the,
You know,
the glass encasement, I know it traps the gases. How soon do you put that frame on?
okay, on matting oils, you can mat oils. There's absolutely no reason. Rembrandt's, you know, the key to matting an oil is that you let it dry, and they do dry pretty quickly because the oils are absorbed into the mat board. And I use archival mat board. These are 100% handmade rag mats. There's no wood pulp in them at all. I let them dry for a while, and I use a little bit of liquid in my paints to help them dry. Then I varnish them, and then my mats are all archival too. They do not, I've been doing this for many, many years. I can't even remember the first time I did this, but I get no off-gassing. They stay clean. The reason I mat them and put them under glass is that it protects them because they're not on canvas or on masonite or on a hard board. So they do have a bit of a fragile surface. So if smoke or grease in the air got on them, they'd be a little more difficult to clean, but not impossible because I did seal them with a varnish. So yes, you can mat them. You think of them not so much as an oil painting, but as a colored etching.
I have a question, Ken, and that is that because of where you live, living right on Pikes Peak, you're surrounded by visions of subjects and compositions. Everywhere you look, I see a painting.
Yes.
And, you know, and my guess is living there, that changes, of course, with every season that you have. Here in Cleveland, we have 4 distinct seasons, sometimes more. And I don't know if you do have a spring, winter, fall, and summer. Do you have 4 seasons?
Well, yes, we do. We have about 9.5 months of winter, about a week and a half of spring, about a week of fall, and about 3 weeks of summer.
I see. And when you go out looking, when you're going to go out painting, what guides you to, okay, that's what I'm going to paint?
Oh, it's the atmosphere, it's the colors. You know, again, what I like to paint is I like to paint a pure landscape, you know, with almost no indication that man has ever been there. It sort of makes me go into a dream state saying I'm the first human being to see this spot, and it's peaceful, it's relaxing, you know, and it's like a little mini vacation. And I hope that my viewers and my patrons, when they buy one, you know, they hang it above their desk or whatever, when what life is getting hectic and they're going nuts, turned on the radio, unhook the phone for a second, relax and look at that painting and escape to the mountains. And that's it. Normally, I also like to do early morning paintings more than late evening paintings. So I'll get up before sunrise and I'll go out, I'll have scouted out where I want to be the next day. And I'll go set up just as the sun is coming up and I'll get that beautiful early morning light. Now I prefer that over evening light in that I can start a painting, and if I, you know, really get into it and it slows down, I have the rest of the day of daylight. If you do an evening painting, you better get it done before it gets dark. And so I like morning light better than evening light. Which brings the question, some of my students said, how can you tell if it's a morning painting or an evening painting? There, you get that warm glow in both of them, but here's the difference. Morning light is light that's warming up the atmosphere and it's warming up the landscape. So it's starting from a cold situation and warming up. Evening light, the day is already warmed up and now it's cooling off into the evening. And there's a slight difference in those temperatures. So one is warming up and one is cooling down. And it can be, you can learn to see the difference.
Do you like compositions with trees? Do you like them
I do.
with streams? Do you like them with
I do.
rocks? Do you like them
I think a creek or a stream is a beautiful lead-in. Now you can also do it with a trail or a road. I don't do roads too often because that's a man-made thing, but a trail is an invitation. It's a lead-in, a nice physical lead-in into your landscape and a good ploy to give you that sense of depth.
Well, it always interests me because I've known Bob Bateman for 30 years. He and I have been friends. So when he was out there at SKB, Anthony and I decided one day we're going to take him up on top of the butte right across the street from the center. That drive that goes up on top. Because once you get up on top of that butte, you got a view north that's just unbelievably spectacular. And we get him up on top of that butte, and he's bored silly. He wasn't interested in the big vista at all. He wanted to. He he tells us on the way up there was a big rock sticking out of the side of the road there. Can we stop there on the way home? He wanted to get a picture of the big rock all the way down. And so we've joked about it. It's always interesting what gets an artist's attention enough to paint it.
I think that Bob Bateman is pretty much a still life painter, a still life of small objects in the landscape, a particular, and the landscape behind it is secondary, really.
Really true.
That's the scientist saying, what kind of plant did you just step on?
Yeah. Yep. When I had my gallery, I did have a Mill Pond Press dealership, and I handled Bob's work and John Siri Lester's work, and there was a difference between the two. And every once in a while, Bob Bateman would do an Arctic polar bear, and the landscape behind it was really soft and distant, but there was a bear sneaking out behind a rock, and that was it. The rock and the bear was even secondary. So yeah, quite a guy, and he's a storyteller too, just like Ray Kinsler was, and John Siri Lester. I just love sitting behind him and listening to the stories. It's just phenomenal, And I think that also helped them with their thought process, that they could tell stories as they painted.
Well, Pam, are you? Do you have any questions? You have to press your space bar.
You're not mistaking me for an artist, are you?
No, you're the
An
boss.
intelligent question about art?
Yeah.
All I know from being a non-artist who tried a lot to draw when I was in grade school and wasn't very successful is how a painting makes me feel when I look at it. And I think that's what most people are looking at, to fall in love with a painting, something they want to look at every day. And Ken has a really good sense of that, how to paint those kinds of things. And Ken, I just want to thank you for your time and effort in this. I'm sorry that I wasn't there, Johnny, on the have a lot of interruptions today, but I'm glad to get in on part of it. So thank you so much. That came across really nice and I think flawless from what I could see. So the system's working.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you very much. When you talk about, connecting with your patrons and with your viewers, I'm a firm believer that the viewer wants to be you, that it's as important as the painting is. that they want to feel like they participated, that they get to know you as an artist and as a person. And I think in marketing and in promoting and just as a human being, connecting is the most important part. And I have a visual record of, you know, how I'm trying to communicate when my paintings are finished. So I just hope that that comes across.
It certainly does. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Anthony and David, am I finished?